It did happen in the summer of 2008, 9 years ago from now. I was a kid back in the days, and it was a nice summer. I'm living in Europe. My parents and I love to travel a lot. That summer we traveled to the small but wonderful country Luxembourg. It's a country between Belgium in the west, Germany in the east, and France in the south. It is a country of West Europe. For the story, it's important to know that this country does have a mountainous landscape. When it did happens. So, in summer 2008, my parents and I traveled in Luxembourg. We traveled with our car and 2 dogs on the roads until we decided to explore a random place. It was a clear and warm summer day. We were alone. Woods surrounded us. We parked the car on the other side of the road. For us was the small mountain of rock. It was like a wall, very smooth. It was at least as high as a house, and on top were trees. A huge crack separated the 2 walls like mountains. There was at the end a stairs made of rock that led up to the higher area of the place. Before we go further, I want to tell you this. I already did meet ghosts in the past. It did give me always an uneasy feeling, a creepy feeling that I'm unwanted on a place and I have to go. This time was not different. Except this time a ghost did show her, and she or something else played with not much time after. When we walked in the crack, I saw her. She looked like sunshine, a strange, strong light, but this was no sunshine. She did have a bit of orange-like color and looked to us. She waved to us and smiled. My mother made a picture with her camera, and she got the ghost on that picture. I was at that time so afraid and walked right to the ghost. Stupid idea, but I just wanted to walk further. Now it sounded strange that I did not walk away from here, but right into here. When I walked in her, it felt very warm, so warm as the body heat of another person, but it surrounded when I walked in here. When I walked further, the heat was gone instantly. My mother found another path through another crack. She wanted to explore it more, and there is a graveyard here. I did not want to visit that graveyard. What I told you is 100% real. At the age of 6, my grandmothers were still alive. I feel my grandparents passed away pretty early in my childhood, and I never really had the chance to get to know them as I was growing up like most other children I knew. Even now, as an adult, my wife and quite a few of my friends have grandparents that are still alive. I wish mine were alive so I could ask questions about their belief in the paranormal and much more, especially since my first experience was in my grandmother's old apartment. I remember it was a cool fall day, and it was the final day of my grandmother, from my father's side, moving out of her apartment. My sister, who was only 2 at the time, stayed home with my older brother. Like I said, it was a cool day out, so I grabbed my favorite red zip-up hoodie. I was excited that my parents let me come help them that day. When we arrived at my grandmother's apartment, it looked so different. Most everything was packed up and in boxes or already moved to her new place. All the big furniture was already gone, except for her bed and a table in the living room area. The table where, as a family, we would sit and roll dozens of dolma, or what others may know as stuffed grape leaves. My grandmother was a great cook. She was actually a chef in Egypt. I remember being a bit sad that all her old antiques and ivory animal figurines were packed up. Looking at them always made me feel like I was in Africa, where she acquired them when she lived in Egypt. Now, though, they were all put away, all but one. My grandmother knew that my favorite was the crocodile, so she put that one aside for me and told me, "I want you to hold on to this for me today. When we get to my new place, you can set the first one on its shelf, wherever you like." I took it from her hands, smiling at her. "Thank you, Grandma." I made sure to keep it safe that day and put it in my jacket pocket, clutching it in my hand. I started helping any way I could, mostly taking small boxes out to the truck or picking up little pieces of trash left around, then vacuuming the empty rooms. The place looked so much bigger with hardly anything in it. A few times throughout the day, I stopped to play with the crocodile in the empty rooms, or rolled around on the floor, or spinning really fast, then falling onto the floor dizzy and watching the room spin. When I do this with my kids now, my wife tells me, stop getting our kids high. She's a real stickler with any type of drug. Rolls eyes. All day I was walking in and out of the house. I remember taking off my hoodie because I started warming up with all the activity. I forgot the crocodile in the pocket. I specifically remember putting my hoodie in the back room on the bed in the master bedroom, then saw that it was moved to the counter of the bathroom once the bed was moved. Once everything was moved out of the house, my mother told me to go get my hoodie. Then we will follow my father. I asked if I could ride with Dad in the moving truck, and my mother said yes. I was so excited. I ran into the house through the front door across the entry hall. To the left was the dining room. I made a right at the living room, which the entry hall leads straight into, ran down the hall, passing the half bath and second bedroom, to the back master bedroom, and into the bathroom where my red hoodie should have been. I looked around the small bathroom and found the ivory crocodile on the counter near the sink. Weird. Why is this here, and where is my hoodie? I remember reaching out to grab the crocodile, and cold chill hit me. All the hairs on my arm and neck stood up. I looked around, then shook off the weird feeling and picked up the ivory piece. I just need to find my hoodie. I looked in the master bedroom closet, just in case it was thrown in there. Nope. I went into the second bedroom, nothing. I slowly walked down the hall, wondering where it could be. I felt I searched the whole house, since I had already run past the dining room and living room. It wasn't in the half bath either. When I arrived at the entry hall, I turned my head right to look into the living room one more time. I froze in place, seeing something I couldn't understand. My red hoodie was in the middle of the living room, but it wasn't alone. There were 6 shadows walking ritualistically around the hoodie in a circle. Once again, the hairs on my neck and arms stood up. I don't know how long I was standing there. I was feeling a mixture of ominous fear and curiosity. Not at what they were, but curiosity of what they would do to me if they saw me watching them. My heart was pounding. I could see through the shadows, yet barely. There was no detail to them. They looked like shadows of people, but they weren't on the walls or floors. These shadows were clearly walking around in the middle of the room. Worse was the feeling I had while so close to them, not just the fear or curiosity. I could feel the malice coming from them. They were pure evil. What do I do? What if they catch me? What will they do to me? Are they going to take me to the underworld? I was only 6 years old, and I knew this wasn't good. I knew I had to get out of there as fast as I could. I made a quick left turn and ran out as fast as I could. Running down the entry, I swear I could feel all of them shift their heads towards me and watch me as I ran out the door. I felt an energy willing me to stop before I made it to the door, willing me to go back. Once I hit the door, I started screaming to my mom. I ran into her arms with tears rolling down my face. I told her what had happened the best I could while crying. I remember her holding me and telling me, "Michael, listen to me, I believe you. Don't worry about the hoodie. We need to leave right now." I never saw that hoodie again. Come to think of it, I just noticed I've never bought a zip-up hoodie ever again either. I always wondered why, when I'm at the store, I tell myself or others who ask, I don't like zip-up hoodies. It's always been a pullover hoodie and never read from then on. Weird to find that little traumatizing fact while writing this. Anyway, I'm not sure what attracted the shadow people to the hoodie, or how it was moved into the living room, or how I didn't see the bright red hoodie as I ran past the room on the way to the master bedroom. I have questions to this day about that apartment and what those could have been. I personally believe they were demons. A few times I had questioned if that was just a dream, but when I ask my mother about that day, she tells me she remembers how scared I was and she still believes me. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and my mother made sure to teach me about demons and what to do if I ever see them again. I've never seen any paranormal entity since, and I'm glad I haven't seen anything since, because in the coming years, Just hearing them and having them move stuff around was enough. For a few years after that, everything was normal. I'm sure I had bad dreams related to that, but I don't remember. Not much of everything else my family or I experienced ever came close to how terrifying that was. A year later, Grandma P became really sick and was put on dialysis and moved to Louisiana with my uncle, who was a doctor. I didn't see much of her after that, and 3 years later she passed away. I really miss her. There's so much I would love to have learned from her about our family and cooking since I became a chef. I didn't know she was an actual chef until after I started cooking and became real passionate in that industry. About a year after Grandma P passed away, my grandmother from my mother's side moved into the house with us. My parents were divorced now, but they remained friends. My father lived somewhere else, and my brother had moved out by now as well. The house I'm now talking about is the house I grew up in till I was 18. The day my parents moved into that house in Moreno Valley, CA, was the day I decided I wanted out of my mother's belly. Anyway, at this point I lived with my mother, sister, Grandma G, and 2 Dalmatians, Cleopatra and Oreo. I don't remember how long my grandmother lived with us, but she passed within 2 years. She actually passed in her sleep on the bed in my old room. My mother didn't want me to, but I snuck down the hall and peeked in the room, seeing her resting body. I have fond memories of her as well. After Grandma G passed away was when the activity started in the house. At that time, I was about 11 years old. I'm not sure if it was Grandma, something else, or possibly both. What went on in that house was nothing horrifying like in The Haunting of Hill House. Yet, it was still creepy and unexplainable. The first thing I remember was when one of our Dalmatians ran away. We had just bought another Dalmatian puppy and named her Sprinkles. So now it was Sprinkles and Oreo. Well, one day, while playing with Sprinkles on our checkered black and white kitchen floor, the puppy stops at the hallway, starts to growl, then barks like there was a stranger standing in the hallway. My mother was cooking in the kitchen behind us, while my sister and I were on the floor with the puppy. My mom turns around to see Sprinkles barking and Oreo looking that way, growling too. She tells us to go out the front door to our right. My sister and I leave while my mother stays behind. A few minutes later, she tells us that everything is okay and dinner should be ready in a few minutes. When I asked my mother about this, years later, she told me, "Something was in the hallway watching us. I couldn't see it, but the dogs could." I stood my ground and told it that this is my house and you need to leave. You are not welcome here. Everything seemed good for a bit. Then, weeks or months later, I can't remember, all 3 of us were sitting in the family room watching TV when we heard something run across the ceiling in the attic. All 3 of us look up and follow the sound with our eyes, turning our heads. "What was that?" my sister asked. Our mom turned to us saying, "It's probably a rat. I don't want to deal with rats." "That sounded pretty big," I said. "It sounded bigger than rats, but not like a human. We thought that maybe some animal got into our attic." The next night we heard it again. Not just once, but 3 or 4 times. "Okay, go grab the ladder. Let's go check it out," my mother said. We grabbed a ladder and a flashlight. I held the ladder while my mother climbed up and opened the attic entrance. Our attic wasn't one you could walk around in. It was full of insulation, and you would have to hunch over and watch your head for nails on the roof sticking out and walk on the beams to get to the other side. Well, my mom looked around. "I don't see anything." The next day when it was light out, she had me go up there with her and look for traces of any animal. We didn't find droppings or nesting or anything that could be signs of an animal. The next night we heard it again, over and over, at least a dozen times. In the middle of it, I went up to see if I could catch a glimpse, and I found nothing. Yet it happened a few more times after I looked and stopped before we were in bed. After that night, it stopped altogether. We didn't hear that noise anymore. Again, I'm not sure of the time in between these events, but what started next was scratching in the walls and ceiling. We thought this time it had to be rats or mice. This happened all throughout the house and even during the day. It was creepiest when we were trying to sleep. Once my grandmother had passed, my sister moved back into our old room while I now slept in my brother's old room. We finally had rooms of our own. I remember trying to sleep when I heard a knock on the ceiling. Knock! It was just one knock, though. Immediately, I felt my spine tingle all the way up to my scalp. I felt something was in the room with me. Then I heard scratching coming from inside the wall near my closet. Shook, shook, shook! It stopped after a couple minutes. I laid there listening and not wanting to move, breathing heavily. I knew I could get up and run if I needed to, but I was too scared to, so I threw the blanket over my head. Next, I heard the knock again right above my bed on the ceiling. Knock! That knock actually scared me even more than the last one, and I had a feeling of fear wash over me right before I heard the scratching in the wall again. Except this time it was right above my head in the wall. Shk, shk, shk. I jumped up and ran into my mom's room. I found my sister already in there, cuddled up against my mom, wide awake, telling her about the scratches she heard in her room. The next day we had an exterminator come and check out the place. They found no trace of any animal in our attic and no entry points for rodents to get into the walls. He told us that there was nothing to worry about, that we are rodent-free. Well, trust me, we really wished it would have been rodents. This activity went on periodically for what seemed like years. You wouldn't hear anything for a few days or even a couple of weeks, then it would be back. One time, when we were all in the family room playing a board game, we heard what sounded like a ball rolling across the ceiling. The sound went from one end of the room to the other and past the wall into another part of the house. Explain that. The attic is full of insulation and beams every 3 feet or so. How would anything roll in the attic? My sister and I became used to the sounds, and it was our normal. When friends would come over and ask what the noises were, we would tell them that we just had rats. Every once in a while, when I wanted to scare a friend or my sister's friends, I'd tell them it was a ghost in a creepy voice, and it only makes sounds when it's angry. I remember this starting before my mom met her boyfriend, and it was still happening when he moved in with us. Now, what I have yet to mention is that my sister and I never really got along. Even to this day, I can't stand her. We actually haven't spoken in about 3 years now. I've been told that strong negativity in a household could either attract dark entities or create a negative energy that contributes to poltergeists. It was bad before my mom's boyfriend, let's call him Hugh, moved in, but he was another level to the negative energy in the house. When he moved in, the activity in the house picked up. He was a correctional officer and worked nights. He had this attitude towards us, where he treated us like his inmates. He had a silver tongue, though, so at first my sister and I really liked him. When he started noticing the activity himself, he told us about all the different things he sees at the facility he was working at in Chino. Hugh tells us, "Sometimes I work the guard towers to keep a lookout for any runners trying to escape. You'd be surprised how often someone tries to run. Well, once a month we have a phantom runner. Actually, just about a week ago, I was training a new tower guard when the trainee called to me and raised his rifle. The trainee said, 'Officer Reyes, look, should I take the shot?' 'Lower the rifle. You won't hit this one no matter how hard you try.' The trainee kept aim. 'What? Why? I have a good shot and he's not stopping even after my warning.' 'Well, he's not real. The bullet will pass right through him. Watch, once he hits the fence, there will be nothing there.' Sure enough, the inmate hit the fence and disappeared. The trainee asked me, a bit shaken up, What the hell? You weren't kidding. Then how would I know if it's a real inmate or the thing?' Hugh tells him, 'Next time, look at the pants. A lot of the ghosts here have bell bottoms.' He had many other stories. But back to the house. So now that we have this a-hole living with us, the activity picks up. At this point, I'm about 16 years old, and things around the house are being moved around when we aren't looking. Hugh, my stepfather, would blame my sister and I for moving his pocket knives, tools, or fishing gear all the time. At first, I thought he was just misplacing this stuff and blaming us. But one day, when I was home alone after school, I placed my keys where I always place them, on the entryway table. Less than an hour later, I was leaving the house to go to a friend's, and the keys weren't there. Sure, I misplaced them, right? Even though I have a strong habit of placing them there every single time I walk in the house. Well, I went and retraced my steps, looked in the kitchen where I grabbed a bite to eat, looked in the restroom where I looked in my room where I changed. I checked near the dogs' food since I fed them. And I looked in the backyard since I took the dogs out to use the restroom. Nowhere to be found. Later in the evening, once everyone is home, my mom's boyfriend comes out of his hobby room that's in the garage yelling at me. He was yelling because he found my keys in his hobby room and now has proof that I was in there moving or taking his stuff. I know for a fact I never went in that room. I hated going in there. It smelled like smoke, and I couldn't stand that he was ruining that room which I had many good childhood memories in. Another thing that happened was on another day when I was home alone after school. I was using the restroom. On the other side of the restroom was a sunroom that my grandfather built after we moved in. Well, on that shared wall, I started to hear a clicking sound. At first, I had no idea what that sound was. Well, I got up and walked through the hall way into the kitchen and to the sliding glass door that would open up into the sunroom. Right when I got to the door, the clicking stopped, so I returned to the restroom. As soon as I reached the restroom, the clicking sound started again, but faster asterisk. Click, 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 click asterisk. This time it dawned on me. It sounded like a switch being clicked on and off. I ran through the hall again to the glass door. It stops. I stand there for a minute, confused. Is it a breaker box? No, the breaker is on the other side of the house, on the outside. What is that sound? I turn to walk back to the restroom, and right when my back is to the door, the clicking starts again. I turn back around and it stops. Now I'm freaked out, but extremely curious. I walk into the room and up to the wall shared with the bathroom. The ceiling in this room is paneled, so I push up a panel and find a switch in the ceiling that I never knew was there. I clicked it a couple of times, and it's the exact same sound. I tried figuring out what the switch was for, but never found out. It stopped clicking after that. Later, I asked my mom about the switch. She said she never even knew it was there, and then made a face of realization. I asked her, "What's that face for?" She replies, "Well, when I'm home alone, I've been hearing a clicking sound, like someone was flicking the light switches on and off." I never found where it was coming from. I interrupted her. "Yes, that's how I found it. I was in the restroom when I heard the noise and kept listening till I found it in the ceiling." We never found out what that switch controlled, and after that day, we never heard it again. Once for a book report, I was reading The Exorcist in my room near a window. Great book, BTW. The window was closed, my door was closed, and I was comfortable and at an intense part of the book when all of a sudden my blinds go asterisk, blurt asterisk, and I can see the blinds being fixed out of the corner of my eyes. You know, when the blinds are a little off and you take your fingertips and run them up the blinds to fix it? Yeah, well, the blinds didn't need fixing. Yet something with a sense of humor had to run its paranormal fingertips up my blinds to scare the hell out of me while I was reading my first scary book ever. I slammed the book shut and noped it right out of my room for the rest of the day. Like I said, the window was closed and my door was closed, so there was no chance of it being the wind. At this point, I am used to these unexplained encounters that keep happening in this house. I remember on a Saturday night, I was in the family room with my sister and my mom watching TV. I usually am the last one to go to bed, but that night I was feeling tired, maybe just bored. Well, I decided to go to bed a bit early. "I'm tired, I'm going to bed." "Good night, Mom, night hemorrhoid." "Good night, Dingleberry," my sister replies. My father used to call us Dingleberry and hemorrhoid when we were younger, so I kept it going once he left the house. My bedroom is right across the hall from the family room. I get in bed and fall asleep around 10:30. At 11:15, I am awakened by a sound. I open my eyes and look around my dark room. I don't feel anything in the room. Unlike when the knock and scratching happens, yes, that was still going on every once in a while, and it always felt just wrong, almost evil. Anyway, I got up to turn on my light. The light switch is right next to the door leading to the hall. The foot of my bed is right below the light switch next to the door. When I turned on the light, I see that my bed had been moved about an inch in front of my door. I become a bit nervous, as that is such a weird thing to wake up to. Maybe an earthquake, I thought to myself. As I pushed the bed back, I noticed 2 pictures had fallen off my wall. One fell right behind the head of my bed, where my head would have been if the bed wasn't moved. The other actually looked like it was placed on my dresser that was next to my bed. That picture had a flap on it, so it would stand up where you placed it. It was placed at an angle, looking directly at the door, right where I was standing. It looked like the tiger cub in the picture was staring straight at me. I pick up the picture from behind my bed and place it on the dresser next to the other one, then push the bed back and walk across the hall to where my sister and mother were still watching TV. "Hi, honey, what's wrong?" my mom asked when she saw the confused look on my face as I walked in the room. Was there an earthquake just now?" Now they are looking at me weird. My sister opens her mouth. "Don't you think we would be up and in the doorway if there were?" I reply back, "Oh, shut up. It could have been a smaller one, just a jolt. Then again, I don't hear you screaming your brains out like, 'Okay, stop it, you two. No, there was no earthquake. Why do you ask?' As she gives me a questioning look. I explained to them, and we just chalked it up to another weird thing that's been happening in the house. The way I see that last happening and why I talked about my grandmother so much before was because I didn't get a bad feeling from that. I actually felt at ease and went right back in my room and fell asleep within minutes. Maybe it was her or some other gentle entity that saw the picture was about to fall on me while I was sleeping, and they moved my bed so it wouldn't hit me and placed the other picture on the dresser as a "I come in peace" signal. It's either that or some evil entity that moved the bed in front of the door so no one could come in while it tried hitting me with a picture, then placing the one on my dresser as a "I'm watching you" signal. I chose to believe the first one. It's still creepy to think about. If whatever that was could move a bed with a 208-pound teenager on it, what else could it do? Once I moved out, I never really had anything happen throughout the years until recently. Yeah, I would wake up in the middle of the night and have this overwhelming feeling of doom hanging over me where I didn't want to move or even open my eyes. But I was used to that and learned to fall asleep quickly so I could wake up in the morning without that feeling. Or I'd start to pray out loud sometimes, but most times it was in my head. Now, the last couple of things that have happened to me were within the last year. I am married now with a beautiful wife, a daughter whom I wish wasn't beautiful, and my amazing son, not to mention 3 dogs and a cat. My wife knows about what has happened in the past, and over the years I've found I can feel when a place has a bad entity, spirit, presence, energy in it. I've been to many apartments to check them out and had horrible feelings, and I wouldn't even dare fill out an application for those places. Well, we just moved into a new house a month and a half ago, and I joke with my wife all the time. She's always asking if I feel or hear anything in this house. I tell her, it's not like I'd be able to hear anything with 3 dogs, a cat, and 2 kids under the age of 8. They all make so much noise I can't even hear my own thoughts. Oh no, I hear scratching. Nope, it's the cat scratching its post. Oh, I hear knocking. Nope, that's the dog scratching and its paw hitting the wooden floors. Yeah, no peace and quiet here. Well, before we moved in here, I had moved into a single-bedroom cottage to get out of her parents' house until we could afford a place on our own. In-laws. Am I right? This cottage was nice. The walls were all brick, and I shared one wall with one other person. The shared wall was brick too. The whole community of cottages was renovated right before I moved in. From what I read, in 2019, this new owner bought the property and kicked all 8 tenants out because it had become a meth community. There were gunshot holes in the roof, The place was run down, and police reports of meth labs being run out of those cottages in the canyon right down the street from Sleepy Hollow. No joke. Sleepy Hollow off of Carbon Canyon. Although I wasn't in Sleepy Hollow, and I don't think Sleepy Hollow has anything to do with that story. Okay, so I move into this place upset that I'm leaving my kids and wife, but happy to be away from the in-laws. Just my Scottish Terrier, Kal-El, and I. After a few weeks of living there, I start to hear a knocking in the wall. Not one knock like the house I grew up in. This knock came in threes. Only knocks of 3, not 4, not 2, no more, no less than 3. While listening to this podcast, Unexplained Encounters, I've heard a couple of times now that a knock of 3 means let me in. These came during the day and night. I'm older now. I'm by myself and nothing has happened for years, so my mind doesn't go straight to, oh no, it's a spirit. I thought nothing of it at first. Maybe it's the neighbor using hot water and its old pipes. The knocks kept happening every day and night though, so one day being bored. After I hear the knocks, I shut off the TV and knock back. Asterisk, knock, 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 asterisk. I didn't expect anything in return, but it knocks right back. Asterisk, knock, 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 asterisk. Usually the knocks don't happen so quickly after the first round, so I knock again and get a triple knockback, asterisk, knock, 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 asterisk, no way, nope. I put Kal-El on a leash and I take him for a walk. I see my neighbor's car is there, so I rationalize it as, she's got to be knocking back, but why is she knocking in the first place? The next day I hear it again, and the next day. So now I do some light stalking trying to find out my neighbor's schedule. When she's not home, I'll make sure not to use hot water. That way I know it's not her using water, and I know I haven't used it, so the pipes won't knock. Well, even though the neighbor isn't home and neither of us are using hot water, the knocks still came. I never gave them any more attention after that first time, though. I didn't want anything to think it was okay to be in contact with me or take things any further. I always got a weird feeling when these knocks came, but it wasn't overwhelming like I've experienced before. Well, one day when I heard the knocks going on, I turn on some music while I'm doing some choreography. I'm listening to handpan music and enjoying it. I just started listening to handpan music 2 days prior to this day. It's relaxing music, and I put the wood-burning pen down, lean back in my recliner and close my eyes to slowly fall into a nap. When I wake up, I hear the music and feel this overwhelming sense of doom that I've felt in the past. Except now it's worse. It feels extremely evil. I could feel it watching me. I'm awake and my eyes are open. I'm soaked in fear from head to toe. It's like adrenaline is rushing through my body, telling me that I need to get out of that house right now. I go to get out of the recliner and I can't move a muscle. All I can do is lay there, hearing the music and feel this thing's aura taking over me, suppressing the energy it takes for me to move. I couldn't move my body, but I could look around. I see the golden sun shining through the window, but there is nothing I could see in the room with me. I feel that if I could look behind me, I could see what was there in the room with me. Would I want to see it, though? All I could do is sit there, breath, and listen to this now horrifying music. After what seemed like minutes had passed, it slowly started fading away, like it was slowly walking backwards, keeping its eyes on me until I was out of its sight. And the further it got from me, the less I felt its aura, and finally I could move again. I got up, shut off that music, grabbed Cal's, and drove out of that canyon for the night. After that, I had no more experiences with the knocking or what I assumed to be sleep paralysis. Before that, I had never had sleep paralysis. I looked into the handpan music, and although there was nothing about the band that made it, I did read that others had experiences like mine from handpan music, and that you need to be careful what you listen to and what intentions the people have when they make their music. Sometimes the energy carries over into music, which can affect the listener. I hear many things about sleep paralysis and how there's a whole scientific explanation to feeling the fear and seeing shadows. I really can only speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't some scientific mumbo-jumbo that I experienced. I felt the fear before I knew I couldn't move. I felt this type of fear before. It wasn't the type of fear I got when I was jumping out of an airplane to parachute. It wasn't even the fear I felt when I was held up at an ATM at gunpoint when I couldn't see the man behind me. It wasn't even the kind of fear I felt when my daughter was in the hospital 5 days after she was born with a 103.9-degree fever. This fear I felt was the same fear I felt when I was 6 years old, watching those shadows walk around my red jacket. An intensified version of the fear I felt many times waking up in the middle of the night when I felt something in the room watching me or making scratching noises. Why would a simple case of sleep paralysis give you the feeling that evil was in the room with you, so close to you that it could reach out and take your soul? Alternate untrue ending. The next day I hear it again, and the next day. So now I do some light stalking, trying to find out my neighbor's schedule. When she's not home, I'll make sure not to use hot water. That way I know it's not her using water, and I know I haven't used it, so the pipes won't knock. Well, even though the neighbor isn't home and neither of us are using hot water, the knocks still came. I never gave them any more attention after that first time, though. I didn't want anything to think it was okay to be in contact with me or take things any further. I always got a weird feeling when these knocks came, but it wasn't overwhelming like I've experienced before. Well, one day when I heard the knocks going on, I turn on some music while I'm doing some pyrography. I'm listening to handpan music and enjoying it. I just started listening to handpan music 2 days prior to this day. It's relaxing music, and I put the wood-burning pen down, lean back in my recliner, and close my eyes to slowly fall into a nap. When I wake up, I hear the music and feel this overwhelming sense of doom that I felt in the past. Except now it's worse. It feels extremely evil. I could feel it watching me. I'm awake and my eyes are wide open. I'm soaked in fear from head to toe. It's like adrenaline is rushing through my body, telling me that I need to get out of that house right now. I go to get out of the recliner and I can't move a muscle. All I can do is lay there, hearing the music and feel this thing's aura taking over me, suppressing the energy it takes for me to move. Although I can't move, I am still able to look around. I see the golden sun shining through my window. Then all of a sudden a shadow appears, walking from the right of my peripheral and into view. I follow it with my eyes, and when it's at about 1 o'clock in my vision, I see another shadow appear in my peripheral, then another. I see 4 in my view slowly walking around me, one at about 10 o'clock, one at 12 o'clock, and one at 2 o'clock. As soon as the first one is out of vision, another one appears to the right of me at 3 o'clock. With my calculations, it would be about 6 shadows walking around me, just like there were 6 shadows walking around my red zip-up hoodie. They are back. At this point, if I wasn't paralyzed due to sleep paralysis or this thing's aura, I wouldn't even try to move. I'm so scared that I could feel myself shaking. I close my eyes and count to 5, and when I open my eyes, I still see them walking around me, but now there is an extra entity in the room. It's in the corner and I can hardly see it, but it's just standing there watching me, observing me, judging me. Its head slowly cocked to the side and slowly moves his head to the other side. I could hardly see it, but I can faintly see a hat. And from the distance, compared to the others walking around me, it seems much taller. At this point, I'm so full of fear that I am near crying. It feels like they have been walking or marching or trudging around me for minutes or even hours. Then I see the entity with the hat start to move close. I didn't know what to do. I close my eyes, wishing and hoping that they would just leave me alone. I remember what my mother told me years ago. If you're too scared to pray out loud, you can pray in your head. Jehovah or God will hear you and he will come to you aid. So I start praying, Dear Jehovah, please help me and give me the strength to be rid of this evil that is here with me. Jesus, come to my aid, banish them from here. I repeated this in my head over and over with my eyes closed until finally I felt the pressure release my soul. When I opened my eyes, I was able to move again and nothing was in the room with me. I quickly shut off the music and went to grab a drink. Then, of course, I grabbed my dog once again and left the house. Did I let them in when I knocked back and replied to them and acknowledged them? Were the knocks I heard and these entities connected? Why was there now a shadow with a hat? He seemed more powerful than the others. When he was walking towards me, the feeling became more intense, so that's what I'd assume. Before that, I had never had sleep paralysis. I looked into the handpan music, and although there was nothing about the band that made it, I did read that others had experiences like mine from handpan music, and that you need to be careful what you listen to and what intentions the people have when they make their music. Sometimes the energy carries over into music, which can affect the listener. I hear many things about sleep paralysis and how there's a whole scientific explanation to feeling the fear and seeing shadows. I really can only speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't some scientific mumbo-jumbo that I experienced. I felt the fear before I knew I couldn't move. I've felt this type of fear before. It wasn't the type of fear I got when I was jumping out of an airplane to parachute. It wasn't even the fear I felt when I was held up at an ATM at gunpoint when I couldn't see the man behind me. It wasn't even the kind of fear I felt when my daughter was in the hospital 5 days after she was born with a 103.9-degree fever. This fear I felt was the same fear I felt when I was 6 years old, watching those shadows walk around my red jacket. An intensified version of the fear I felt many times waking up in the middle of the night when I felt something in the room watching me or making scratching noises. Why would a simple case of sleep paralysis give you the feeling that evil was in the room with you, so close to you that it could reach out and take your soul? To start off this story, I live in Alaska, and this story took place when I was about 10. I'm F15. So on to the story. During the summer, I always went camping. When I went camping, I went with my old best friend and her family. I'll call her Anna for privacy. But during this summer, her father decided we'd go to like the middle of nowhere and camp. I was not up for it, but I didn't want to be at home, so we went to camp for the week. Everyone who went on the trip was my friend Anna, her father, her 2 brothers, her brother's girlfriend. Once we got to the camp, I was scared to get out because I saw a sign that said, "Be aware of bears," and being little, I thought I'd get attacked if I was ever alone. Also, we left really early in the morning and didn't get to the camp until 2 p.m. I was really tired and sore from being in the car so long and eventually got out of the car to help. The camp we went to was surrounded in woods and had a little pit for a fire and was good for our tent. Later on, we finally got settled and Anna wanted to go fishing. We saw a lake and a stream. We grabbed our fishing poles and tried to leave on our own when we were stopped, and were told to go with her brothers and the girlfriend. We had to make our own path, and her older brother had a machete to cut a path, so we finally got to the stream after like 5 minutes of walking and had a lot of fun. Then out of nowhere, we all got like a chill down our backs and got spooked, and I started saying I wanted to go back to camp, and then Dan, the oldest, said to stop whining, and if I wanted to go back, I had to go on my own, and Anna said she'd go back with me, and so we left and went down the path that we thought we made, and in reality we didn't, and didn't realize it wasn't our path until we got to a dead end, and were surrounded by raspberry bushes, then started freaking out. And out of nowhere we heard something walking through the woods going towards us, and I said it could be a bear. Then we started freaking out more because we couldn't see anything. Then I noticed the smoke from a fire, not too far but not close. It was past the bushes. That's when I dropped my pole and grabbed my friend Anna, and we ran through the bushes and Devil's Club, a stick-like plant with big leaves and spikes. I didn't even notice how much it hurt from adrenaline and the fear of getting caught by whatever was following us. When we finally got through the bushes, we were a bloody mess. Our legs were covered in blood and dirt, and our clothes were torn, and we ended up in a different campsite next ours, and the people stared at us, confused. I looked back at the woods to see a huge black figure go back into the woods. I was relieved to see it go and collapse to the ground, And that's when the couple helped us up and brought us to our camp. And when her family saw us, they all freaked out and asked us where we went. And for the next hour or two, we explained what happened, and they told us we were gone more than an hour, and they tried looking for us. And for the rest of the trip, my friend and I slept in the truck. Ever since this incident, I've never gone camping in that area and camp where lots of people are, and today I still don't know what was in the woods and what it intended to do if it got us, and I'm glad it didn't. And to this day, we still talk about this incident. I'm your average early 40s guy. Recently divorced on my own with my 3 kids living with me every second week. This week the kids were at their mother's. I hated these weeks. The house seemed far too empty. To say I was suffering from empty nest syndrome would be an understatement. It was Monday, and what you would call a typical Monday. Work was frustrating. My crew and I were building a house, and we were in the framing stage. We had fallen behind, and nothing I could do motivated them. It was hot as hell. Usually I would have done shorter days, but we were so far behind I was doing all I could to catch up, including working until dark every night all by myself. I got home that night about 10:30, had a quick shower, a bite to eat, and crashed. About 3 o'clock or 3:30, I was awakened by what looked like a shadow in my bedroom doorway. Blacker than black, not transparent at all. I went to get up thinking someone was in the house. The dark shadow was immediately on top of me, pinning down my legs and arms. It had what looked like a body of some sort, sitting on my legs with 2 appendages holding my arms. I was in great shape at the time, working in construction and being an up-and-coming power lifter. Try as I might with all my strength, I couldn't move. I fought and fought, but no matter what I did, I couldn't move. All of a sudden, it was gone, and I could move freely again. I sat up in bed, shaking, wondering if that really happened or if it was just a terrible nightmare. I decided it was just a nightmare and wandered downstairs for a quick drink to calm my nerves. In about a half an hour, I was headed back up to bed. The next day at work was just as frustrating, drifting even further behind schedule. I asked my crew if they wanted to change to a 4 a.m. to noon schedule for the rest of the week and beat the heat. None were interested. My guys were usually very good, but I guess the heat was too much for all of them. Looking back, maybe I should have shut down for the week. I worked again until about 10:30, then headed home. Same scenario as the night before, shower, quick dinner, and bed. The last night's adventures a distant memory. Again, at around 3:30, I was awakened by the same black shadow in the doorway. As with the night before, in a flash it was on top of me, this time sitting on my abdomen. Again, it was far too heavy or strong. Despite how I tried, I couldn't move, and this time I was having trouble breathing. I struggled and struggled, but it was no use. My head felt like it was going to burst from lack of oxygen. I started thinking that this was the end. I was just about to pass out, and poof, it was gone. This time I got up and sat on the back deck, sipping multiple glasses of Crown Royal. Despite still thinking that it was a terrible nightmare, I couldn't control my shaking. There was no more sleep that night. There's no need for me to mention the next day at work. It was very much the same. This time I only worked until 9 p.m. I was starting to burn down, and I had another day in family court the next day, my ex after more money again. I did the same nightly routine and was in bed by 10:30, although I had a rough time getting to sleep. I finally drifted off about 1 a.m. Again, about 3:30 in the morning, I was awakened by the shadow. It was instantly sitting on my chest, cutting off my ability to breathe. It leaned forward until its face was about 3 inches from mine, forcing me to look into its black, bottomless eyes. They were more like empty eye sockets. I could taste what I could only guess was its rancid breath on my tongue. In a low, rumbling voice, I heard it say, "You're mine." Again, I was just about to black out when it disappeared. There was absolutely no more sleep that night. I got dressed and went to an all-night diner where I sat sipping coffee and shaking. That day I was in court. It wasn't a good day. Her lawyer was particularly nasty. To put it simply, I walked in with all my payments up to date and walked out owing $10,000. Her lawyer convinced the judge the nights and weekends I was hanging with friends working on their cars or houses was actually cash work. The judge wouldn't listen to me and nailed me with the 10G. I did go after that judge, but that's another story. To say I was in a terrible mood when I left would be an understatement. I went to the gym trying to work off my frustrations, but it was no use. After the gym, I went by the job site to see how things had gone without me. I shouldn't have. The owner was there and immediately started tearing a strip off me because my guys left at noon. I couldn't blame his anger, so I just continued to apologize. I had no excuse. On my way home, I stopped at our little pub liquor store and picked myself up another bottle of Crown. I had completely forgotten about my little entity problem. My dinner that night was of the liquid variety. I killed the better part of my bottle. It was a good thing I only bought a 26R. I tossed and turned in bed, my anger boiling over. At about 3:30, me wide awake, I saw the black mass forming in my bedroom doorway. In a rage, I jumped out of bed screaming, "Not tonight, you asshole!" I bolted across the bedroom and slammed into the door jamb, almost knocking myself out. I never saw that entity again. So I'm not going to give my name, but I am going to give you some background on me and why the title is the way it is. So, let's start off with me first off. I'm a guy. If you were to see me on the street, you may think I'm a football player, and you would be wrong. I like other sports. So, next up. I've been a believer in both the religion and in the supernatural, not the Sam and Dean Winchester stuff, for as long as I can remember. Heck, I grew up watching Tales from the Crypt, the original Ghostbusters 1 and 2. Now maybe I'll count the Afterlife as well. I haven't seen the latest one about being frozen. Mummy's Alive, as well as The Mummy, just to name a few. Anyway, but this isn't what influenced me. I've always been able to see things that other people don't. Most readers may believe me and some may not, but when on my last post I'll share my thoughts on what I think is happening, and then I'd say, you are free to judge. So enough of that soapbox. I've always had the ability to see into the spirit reel or another side. I think it's a family trait. But for the most part, this is how mine works. I don't know of anybody else's visions and how they work, so please don't ask. Usually mine works very much like a camera. Yes, I have a photographic memory. In short, I see with my physical normal eye, place them, my mind's eye drowns out the normal stuff, and I see the shape of whatever is there. For me, it's like looking at two screens at once, or if you're old enough to remember these, the old still photo projectors, but with an overlay on them. Or I don't see anything in the natural at all, but instead will sense a presence look over there, and then see someone or thing in my mind's eye. I see that person or thing. Yes, I'm awake during it. Sometimes, yes, the person can be heavily on my mind, and other times not at all. That's just how my sight or vision works. Now, I'm not saying everyone else does, that's just mine. Keep in mind this all happens to me in about a second or so. Please don't ask if I know how anyone else's works. So I'm going to start off with one or two when I was a child. Now, for context, as a kid, I've been pretty smart, but not schoolwork smart, and my mom was doing her best to raise me. As one can imagine, her work hours were long, and I would have to go stay with a family friend while she worked. This family friend would bring me to church on Sundays. There was one particular man who took an interest in me, not in the Catholic priest's sense. He began to mentor me. He was also a deacon in the church. When he began to get sick, he passed on his deaconship to me. I was a kid, barely holding my own in first grade, let alone for any type of leadership. Yet he did. As time went on, I was trained and taught the ways of the deacon, or at least the physical part. It was, I think, sometime later that I began seeing it. Since my mom worked the overnight shift, I had to stay the night with her. My mom's friend was retirement age, so no weird comments, please. We stayed in the same room, but I was on a fold-out bed that faced the doorway. Yet when I went to sleep at night and all the lights were turned out, I could make out the image of a man in the doorway. There were no men in the house. He never said anything. He never did anything. He never crossed the threshold of the door, yet he was always there. I don't remember if I brought it up to anyone. Yet what I do know is that it stopped shortly after when the man who was mentoring me died. My biggest theory is that he was checking on me in the spirit world, to see if I was all right, like in a fatherly manner. My next one is similar, so a bit of history first. I met my grandfather twice, first time I was too young to remember, and the second time I was in second grade, I believe. He didn't live close to us, and when he saw me, he gave me a scowl that could curl paint, curdle milk, and make an FBI agent rethink his life choices. So yes, I was afraid of him. Thus, not someone I wanted to think about too much. Yet one night in September of '96, yes, it's important, I saw a full-figured outline and felt it was him right at the foot of my bed. He walked around my bed. He wasn't angry at me. The impression that I had gotten was that of a parent looking in to see if his kids were okay. I asked my mom about it in the morning, and she said that she had felt a presence in the house. She thought it was me. I replied, no, I stayed in bed all night. In February of '97, he died. It did hurt, but once all the preparations and the funeral were taken care of a few months later, my mom asked me about that night in September. As we both went over it, we both got the impression that it was my grandfather who showed up that night. Mind you, he has never been to the house, ever. It was a dark and stormy night. The wind was howling outside, and the rain was beating against the windows of my old, creaky house. I had just finished watching a scary movie and was feeling a little on edge. As I made my way up the creaky old staircase to my bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I tried to shake off the feeling and convince myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I entered my room and turned on the light, I froze in shock. Standing in the corner of my room was a figure dressed in all black with pale, ghostly skin and dark, sunken eyes. My heart raced as I stared at the figure, unable to move or speak. It didn't move, just stood there, staring at me with a malevolent gaze. I tried to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light or a figment of my overactive imagination, but deep down, I knew that what I was seeing was real. I slowly backed away from the figure, my hands shaking with fear. As I reached for the doorknob, the figure suddenly lunged towards me, its long, bony fingers reaching out for me. I let out a scream and slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. I sat on the floor, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. Was it a ghost? A demon? Or was it all just a hallucination brought on by fear and exhaustion? I tried to shake off the fear and convince myself that it was all just a dream, but as I laid in bed, unable to sleep, I heard strange noises coming from the hallway outside my room. Footsteps echoed on the wooden floors, whispers floated through the air, and a cold, icy breeze swept through the room. I sat up in bed, my heart racing, as I saw the figure standing in the corner of my room once again. Its dark, piercing eyes bore into mine, sending shivers down my spine. I could feel its malevolent presence filling the room, suffocating me with its icy grip. I mustered up the courage to speak, my voice shaky and weak. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure just stood there, staring at me with a haunting gaze. I begged for it to leave me alone, to go back to whatever dark place it had come from. But the figure just laughed, a deep, guttural sound that chilled me to the bone. I buried my head in my hands, tears streaming down my face as I felt the figure move closer. Its icy breath brushed against my cheek, sending a shiver down my spine. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the room, and the figure disappeared in a puff of smoke. I looked up to see a figure bathed in light standing before me, its face kind and compassionate. "Child, do not be afraid," the figure said, its voice calm and soothing. "I am here to protect you from the darkness that seeks to consume you." I clung to the figure, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I am your guardian angel," the figure replied. "I am here to protect you from the forces of evil that seek to harm you. Do not fear, for you are never alone." And with that, the figure vanished, leaving me in a state of shock and awe. I drifted off to sleep, feeling a sense of peace and protection wash over me. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside my window and the warm rays of the sun shining through the curtains. I smiled, feeling a sense of calm and reassurance wash over me. Was it a ghost, or was it a demon? I may never know for sure, but one thing I do know is that I am never alone, and that there are forces of good that watch over me, protecting me from the darkness that seeks to consume me. And as I stepped out into the warm morning sun, I felt a sense of gratitude and peace wash over me, knowing that I am safe and protected no matter what lurks in the shadows. I have always been a light sleeper. The slightest noise can wake me up from a deep slumber, so it was no surprise when I first sensed the presence of a man in my room. It was on a cold winter night when I felt a cool breeze brush against my skin, causing me to stir awake. At first, I thought it was just a draft from the window, but as I opened my eyes, I saw him standing at the foot of my bed. The man was tall and lean, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to stare straight into my soul. His presence was both comforting and unsettling at the same time. I tried to speak, to ask him who he was and what he wanted, but no words came out of my mouth. Instead, I could only watch in silence as he moved closer to me, a gentle smile playing on his lips. As the days went by, the man started visiting me every night. Sometimes he would sit by my bedside and watch me sleep. Other times he would stroke my hair and whisper soothing words in my ear. I grew accustomed to his nightly visits, finding solace in his presence during those lonely hours of the night. But despite his calming demeanor, there was an air of mystery surrounding the man. I could never quite shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. There were nights when he would disappear without a trace, leaving me to wonder if he had ever been real or just a figment of my imagination. One night, as I lay in bed staring up at the ceiling, the man appeared before me in a shimmering light. His ethereal form glowed with a soft radiance, casting a warm glow over the room. I could see now that he was not of this world, that he was something beyond human comprehension. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible in the stillness of the night. "I am a guardian of the night," he replied, his voice like a gentle breeze that caressed my skin. "I watch over those who need me, guiding them through the darkness." I was both awestruck and terrified by his words. What did he mean by guiding me through the darkness? Was there something lurking in the shadows that I was unaware of? As the nights passed, the man revealed more of himself to me. He told me stories of ancient times, of battles fought and victories won. He shared with me the secrets of the universe, of how the stars aligned and the planets danced in harmony. I listened intently, hanging on to his every word like a lost soul seeking redemption. But as much as I yearned to know him better, there was always a part of him that remained elusive. He would vanish into thin air without warning, leaving me to wonder if he had ever been there at all. One night, as I lay in bed, bathed in the glow of the moonlight, the man spoke to me in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "It is time for you to face your fears," he said, his eyes shining with an otherworldly light. "There is darkness within you that must be confronted, a shadow that threatens to consume you if left unchecked." I felt a chill run down my spine at his words. What darkness was he referring to? Was there a part of me that I was unaware of, lurking beneath the surface like a dormant volcano waiting to erupt? The man reached out a hand towards me, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through my body. I could feel the power surging through me, awakening something deep within my soul. "Do not be afraid," he whispered, his voice like a gentle caress. "Embrace the darkness within you, for only then can you truly be free." And with those words, the man vanished into the night, leaving me to ponder his cryptic message. I lay in bed for hours, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions that I could not explain. In the days that followed, I found myself drawn to the darkness like a moth to a flame. I delved into the deepest recesses of my mind, searching for the source of the shadow that the man had spoken of. And as I confronted my fears head-on, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me like a cleansing tide. I no longer feared the darkness within me, for I knew that it was a part of who I was. And as I embraced my true self, I felt the man's presence fade away, his nightly visits coming to an end. But I will always remember the man who visited me every night, the guardian of the night who showed me the true meaning of courage and self-discovery. And as I drift off to sleep each night, I know that he will always be watching over me from the shadows, guiding me through the darkness with a gentle hand and a kind heart.